Hey everyone, Guinea here, and today what we're going to do is read on the Unificationist Youth Join the Gun Control Debates. I'm just going to read this and also give my commentary and also give a principled perspective on this. Before I do, let me just introduce where I come from with the Second Amendment. I am a heavy supporter of the Second Amendment. I think it's really great that God gave us a right to defend ourselves away from evil. And I believe that we have the right to do whatever we want as long as we don't infringe on other people's freedoms, and yet other people don't use their freedoms to infringe on my right as well. So this is definitely a response coming from the Florida shooting, and it's really sad of what happened. I don't like what happened, and it happened in a place where it was a gun-free zone. Teachers or other people didn't have the ability to defend themselves from this potential, well, at the time, potential mass murderer. Now he is. Now the NRA has been so much blamed for this when really they shouldn't. Actually, on record, members of the NRA have no criminal records whatsoever with guns. These have been very responsible people, and yet they're the ones who are to blame. Me personally, I am actually a supporter of GOA, Gun Owners of America, and they too as well. No member has actually committed any type of gun crime, which is really sad. So before I go on, just a little bit of Unificationist political history. Reverend Moon was actually a prisoner in North Korean communist gulag and was free from it from UN forces. He has a very strong understanding that communism is really political Satanism, and he would do anything to destroy it. And he has actually exemplified that throughout his life. He has actually created the Vulcan cannon and offered it to the South Korean government or South Korean military in order to defend the nation from North Korea. He also made the Washington Times in 1982, which was a conservative news media, an alternative conservative news media, fighting against liberal progressive news medias, because that was so prominent in America and where it was really convincing people to actually take away their own rights without even knowing. So it's very clear that Reverend Moon has supported conservatism for a very long time. What's very sad is that Family Fed has slowly in time became a lot more liberal. I know a lot of leaders in there and also a lot of my friends and young people over there who don't have a very clear understanding of economics. They're a lot more socialist thinkers, no understanding of the value of capitalism, and they also are strong feminists. There's a very strong belief in feminism where they go for gender balance and gender neutrality. So it's very strange what it has become. Also, on the issue of guns, they don't have the full understanding of the Second Amendment, the right to protect yourself. You're going to get a lot, if you were to talk to people from Family Fed, you're going to get a lot of how they think guns should be controlled by the government. So now what I'm going to do is read these young people's take on the issue, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that these people are stupid or they're dumb. I understand they're young and, in a certain environment that they're in, maybe they don't have enough information for them to see both sides of the argument. I don't blame them. I understand when I was young, I was easily accessible to information where I just didn't understand both sides. Once I understood both sides, and I'm like, oh, wait, okay, that makes sense. Don't get me wrong with these young people. I think they're in their own right courageous to put themselves out there to say what they believe in on the issue, and I commend them for that. So again, don't get me wrong in when I explain or make a commentary of them. So here we have this young man named Basun Karimi at age 19. I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. Please forgive me. Let's go on. When I was in high school, if you had a problem, you would go talk to a counselor. The way the school system works right now is just taking students in through high school and getting them out as fast as possible and efficiently. That's what it's about, and there's no heart in it at all. You don't really grow internally. Yes, I totally agree, Basun. I think it's really cool for schools to have counselors. I think that's very good for students to go to prevent from maybe any suicidal thoughts, or maybe some bullying issue, or maybe just the simple stress of over workload that's on their minds. It's a much better way than to pop up pills, maybe like antidepressant pills, when in actuality, students will end up being more depressed. So I think that's a really good take. As long as the counselor has Christian values in which they are sharing and with the students, not some relativistic point of view, because that could actually backfire in the students. Let's go on. Okay, so I think we need tighter gun laws and regulations because it's very easy for anyone to go purchase a gun, background checks, and even maybe looking at who has a gun and evaluating their mental health and physical health, because it's very dangerous to have that many guns out there. I think internal issues are way bigger though, because if we teach the young people now about how it feels and to understand all their internal thoughts and feelings, then when they grow up, they'll understand their feelings and how they're supposed to live in their life and grow. They could even have a gun if they can control themselves. If they're doing it for hunting or sport, it'll be okay. So it's much more important, the internal growth, than laws. So here it is. This is very common of what I hear from liberal progressives about hunting and sport. If you were to think from a liberal progressive mindset, really what liberals would say is, people shouldn't have guns, only for hunting and sport, that's okay. But the thing is, it's growing so much to the point where they're equivaling humans with animals. So animals, because liberals are fighting for animals' rights as equal as a human being. So if it gets to that point, well, then it's considered murder to hunt an animal for food. So in that case, guns would totally be obsolete. It's interesting. He says that there should be background checks. Again, background checks don't work because any way, form, or possible, bad guys will always get guns no matter what, no matter how strict the background check is. They could get guns from maybe a friend that has a clean record, maybe your girlfriend, or maybe themselves if they have a clean record. And also, what defines mental health? Well, government is the one that actually defines mental health. So also, good people will tend to follow the background checks, and they're the ones who don't end up getting the guns. So who's the one that ends up getting the guns? The guys who are really bad, and they're the ones who actually want to shoot up the good people. So again, it makes good people not have guns. That's not a good remedy for this situation about the background checks. What I do agree with him is that the internal problem is the main issue. I'm in 100% agreement with that. I think mental health is a huge issue with these mass shootings that have recently happened. And I think that is something that has to deal with, and fundamentally does have to deal with the family. So I'm in full support of what he said about that. Let's go on with Chungbom Katayama. I'm sorry if I butchered your name as well. Let's see what he says. For the mass shootings, one problem is that the shooter got a hold of the firearms. But the real cause for the problem is that the people who conduct gun violence have a very high percentage of not having parents or even any parental figures in their lives. We are seeing problems of gun violence, but not seeing the problem that goes back to the family and the lack of parents for the children who grow up to become isolated individuals who are full of resentment. Yes, I am total agreement with Chungmam on this. I think it's totally true. It's the family. If you have a lack of love between parents to the children, the children are going to essentially try to find their own self-identity. And if it gets to the point where they're extremely having a lack of love, especially from students in school that aren't befriending them, right there, I would not be surprised, just like what happened in Columbine with those two students that ended up shooting their classmates and their teachers. So I'm in full agreement of that. I think that is a problem that definitely needs to be dealt with in education of the family and the parents to children. So what else does he say? He says, so my opinion is that the youth in the world are seeking for solutions because they see the problem right in front of them. Yep, that's true. They see the problem right in front of them, and we do have to act in a very mature way, not out of emotion. But let's see what he keeps on saying. They are not okay with the way the world is, but don't really know how to address the problem, which is the family. Total agreement with him. However, as a practical step, I do believe that stronger restriction of gun ownership is needed, but only as a way to protect the immature and unready individuals from getting a hold of guns, which in turn can prevent mass shootings or accidents involved with firearms. So, see, right here, this is a problem. What's common between these two is that they are total agreement of family. I'm totally in agreement with the problem of the family, but then, some pragmatic take to band-aid the problem at least would be to have some gun regulation, which that's not the answer. And matter of fact, I'll explain later. Here we go. Let's see what Masato Koiza, age 22, I'm sorry, little lady, if I butchered your name, says. She says, since the mass shooting happened in Florida in February, a lot of students in school have been walking out of school. They are mainly protesting about gun control, but I believe guns are not the main issue. I believe too, little lady. Here we go. I believe it all comes from family because there are so many broken families that cannot give children what they deserve. There develop problems in the child, for example, resentment or anger control issues. Those children then bully other children in school and spread such resentment. I strongly believe family is the key to change the world. So here's something I agree with all of them. It's all rooted in the family. I'm in total 100% agreement with that. What I don't agree with these two, what they said, not her, she actually didn't mention it, is to at least band-aid the problem is to have gun restrictions. Actually, when that happens, and this is what happened in Nazi Germany, this is what happened in communist Russia, Venezuela, so forth, you can just go on with the list, is that it's always for the sake of the children. We have to protect the children, so let's take away people's guns. Let's take away these mass weapons of war. As a matter of fact, what's really interesting is that, fun fact, King Henry VIII has actually called the musket a mass weapon of war for the colonists to actually not have. But obviously that is in fear of the colonials to have the right to defend themselves because he wanted to own them, right? But thank God the British Empire didn't own the colonists after the Revolutionary War. Now, if I were to go from a principle perspective, but also the 4 amendments to the Bill of Rights, right? Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, Second Amendment, and also third and fourth has to do with property. It's the respect of property. If you really think about the difference, or actually the similarities between the Bill of Rights, especially the first 4, and also the 3 things that make up freedom, for what the divine principle explains, is that it's in all relation to your body. God gave you a body. He didn't give you free things per se. You have to acquire those things yourself with the body that you have. God gave you a body that you have responsibility over for, and you get to exercise your freedom with the body that you have, right? This is what us people who are raised in Unificationists believe, that our spirits can only grow when we have a body, right? Due to the freedom that we have. Here's the thing, is that freedom of religion, what does that mean? Well, really what it meant, what the founding fathers meant, is that you have the right to believe whatever you want, right? And then freedom of expression, you could express that from which is in your mind. Also, right to bear arms, right? Right to defend, again, your body, right? This is the most fundamental, natural thing that all of creation has, is some form of self-defense. And then with especially number 4, that there should be no search and seizure, right? No one should intrude into your property. If you really think about what is the first property that you own, it is essentially your body. That is the very first property that you own. Now, if we think about the 3 things that make up freedom in the divine principle, 1, it is freedom cannot exist outside of the principle. And what the principle says is that we have a free will. What we can think of anything that we want within our mind. That is just like freedom of religion. And also the freedom to act, right? To actually act out what is in our mind. That is just like freedom of expression. Again, it is within the body. What about number 2? Number 2 is freedom has to exist within responsibility, right? Freedom cannot exist without responsibility. They have to be equal. If you have more freedom and less responsibility, what does that make you into? It makes you into a tyrant. If you have less freedom and more responsibility, what does that make you into? Well, yeah, it makes you into a slave. The thing is, you can't use your freedom to then tread on other people's freedom, and thenceforth, no one should use their freedoms to tread on you. That's why with Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, where it says life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, no one can tread on that, but you can't tread on anyone else's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as well. So why is it that with the gun restrictions that violates our freedoms essentially? Well, if you think about it, the last two, okay, with the three things that make up freedom, okay, so freedom has to exist with responsibility. So if this gunman who has misused their right to harm other people, which is very, very bad, for some odd reason, they should have less freedom then, right? They should go through some court system where they should be in jail. There has to be justice that's placed on this person. So for them to commit such an act, they should have less freedom, right? And matter of fact, more responsibility. They had to take on more responsibility because they took those people's lives, right? So what's the freedom that person should not have? Yeah, that person shouldn't have a gun because they've misused that weapon on other innocent people. So yes, that person's responsibility should be added up because they actually took the lives of other people. Therefore, he should have less freedom. But the problem is that he took other people's lives. And therefore, by the way, when I'm speaking like this, I'm not mad at these three people, but I'm just really upset about this situation and tricking such innocent people into this gun debate. So the thing is, because of this person's misresponsibility, therefore, let's make some laws to make it harder for people to own weapons, or to the point where people shouldn't even own weapons at all. So therefore, now everyone else who did not commit that crime is burdening the same responsibility as that person, and yet we have not misused our freedom to commit any heinous acts. And yet, again, we are the ones who are bearing more responsibility, more so than our freedom. What does that then make us into? Well, essentially that makes us into slaves. The person who has committed the act, therefore that person should be a slave to all those other people who he has harmed. But that shouldn't translate to everyone else. So already that's violating that freedom in the divine principle. What's the third part of principle? The third part of principle is freedom can only exist with accomplishments, right? In other words, freedom has to exist with results. Okay, so if we don't get clear results, then actually we're not so free. It's kind of like socialism, where you're the one who, or communism, where let's say they use your freedom to bear much fruit, but you don't exactly reap what you sow. It goes to the government and the government distributes it by force. So you're not exactly getting the same fruits as what you actually deserve in the first place through your creativity and your hard work. So in this case, to restrict or have gun restrictions on the mass people who haven't committed anything, well, here's the thing. If you're the one who committed the stupid, heinous act in killing other people, then the result that you should get is exactly go to jail. Or maybe you should die, or maybe you should be a slave essentially to those who you've harmed or harmed their families, right? That should be a clear result to that individual who has committed that crime, who misused their freedom. But again, because it's treating us as a collective rather than individuals, so everyone else is burdening that same responsibility or that same result, that because of this one irresponsible individual who has committed this crime, now everyone, fruit, as if all of them, like the NRA, like GOA, has committed these crimes. So they're the ones who bear these results, that they should have less power in exercising their Second Amendment right, which is totally unfair. It's totally not good. So I hope that you guys understand this from a principled point of view. And I'm not saying this out of hatred or anger to these three people. I really care about people. I really care about, especially young people who I grew up in my community back in Red Hook. And for those who I love in Family Fed, I really care about you guys. So please understand about the role of freedom that God has actually given to humankind. And it's sad that there are people who are actually treading on our freedoms for us to not exercise on those rights. So I love you all. I wish you guys the best. Peace out.